All right, let's get into it. Today, we're basically creating a user manual for our own very distracted minds. And we're pulling all this wisdom from the idea of inner ownership. We're going to figure out how to stop renting happiness from the outside world and finally, start owning it for ourselves. So let's start with the core metaphor here because it's just perfect. Imagine your life is this gigantic shopping mall. You're constantly rushing from one store to another, the career store, the relationship store, the news store, always chasing the next sale, the next shiny offer of happiness. But then, this ancient wisdom kind of taps you on the shoulder and whispers, hey, you do realize you own the actual land this whole mall is built on, right? And that really leads us to the central question we're going to unpack. Why do we live like tenants? Why are we constantly paying this emotional rent for validation, for a sense of security, for little hits of joy when we are the very foundation of our own experience? This is the core of what we're calling the happiness rental trap. Okay, so let's dive into our first section, the happiness rental trap. What exactly is it? And why do we act like we're just temporary guests in a life that we fundamentally own? Think of it like this. We're living in an emotional Airbnb. It's a brilliant way to put it. We get these temporary, nice views from external things, our partner's approval, that paycheck hitting the bank, a bunch of likes on social media. But because we don't own the house, we're living in this constant state of low-grade anxiety, always worried that the owner's going to kick us out or the rent's going to go up. So the very first step out of this trap is this profound, shocking moment of realization. It's when you finally stop and ask yourself, wait a second, am I insane? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep paying? According to this wisdom, that jolt, that moment of clarity, is the beginning of real mental maturity. So why are we so stuck in this pattern? Well, Section 2 gets right to the heart of it. It suggests our minds are basically running on some really outdated software. Let's take a look at the operating system update we all desperately need. Now, what's so cool about this slide is how clearly it just lays out the upgrade. Our brain's default setting, the old OS, is totally reactive. A stimulus comes in, an email, a comment, and bam, an instant programmed reaction like anger or fear. The new OS, the upgrade, introduces one absolutely critical step: awareness. A stimulus comes in, we become aware of it, and in that tiny gap, we get to make a conscious choice about how to respond. That changes everything. You know, we all have this incredibly powerful tool, our intellect, but most of the time, we use it like a cheap little flashlight, just waving it around at whatever external drama catches our eye. Politics, what our boss said, office gossip, you name it. The real work is to stop doing that and start using it like a laser, pointing it inward to ask the most important question there is. Who is the one that's getting disturbed by all this noise? And this leads us to this brilliant little concept, Atma TV. You know, instead of being tuned into the 24/7 chaos of CNN or whatever news cycle has you hooked, Atma TV is about changing the channel. It's the practice of turning your focus inward, to your own personal internal broadcast. It's about deciding to study yourself for a change, not just the world. Which brings us right to Section 3, the Inner Ownership Manual. And this isn't about some vague, fluffy ideas. No, this is a disciplined, almost scientific approach to retraining your own mind. I absolutely love this metaphor. Just picture it. You're on a train. You've done the work, you bought the ticket, you found your seat. The train is already moving towards your destination. But out of sheer anxiety, you start running up and down the aisle thinking you're going to get there faster. It's completely absurd, right? Well, the discipline to practice, that's the train. Once you commit to it, you have to trust the process. All your restless, anxious effort just burns you out for no reason. So what does this discipline actually look like? Well, the source material lays it out as a clear, repeatable procedure. You start with your posture, just finding a steady, comfortable position. Then you do a body scan, connecting with physical sensations. Third, and this is key, you witness your thoughts as they float by without judging them. If your mind gets carried away, you can use a mantra to gently guide it back. And finally, you just rest in this state of do-nothing awareness, a simple, non-reactive presence. Here's another great analogy for you. Think about it like an airport check-in. Before you can board the flight to inner wisdom, what do you have to do? You have to power down your devices. Well, in this case, the main device you have to power down is your ego, your collection of habitual, knee-jerk reactions. You have to consciously park those patterns so your higher, more discerning intellect can actually take the lead. And in section 4, we're going to see how to take all these ideas off the meditation cushion and apply them directly to the beautiful, chaotic mess of our daily lives. This is how we move from complaint to calm. So here's the game plan. In your daily life, try scheduling a world off mode. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's just 30 minutes, where you don't try to solve all the world's problems. At work, when you feel that panic rising, remember the train. Do your duty, steadily, don't thrash around. And in relationships, when you feel that neediness, recognize you're trying to rent happiness again. The shift is to stop renting and just start seeing and appreciating the other person. And on the meditation seat itself, you give your intellect a brand new job description. Its old job was being a noisy commentator, judging every single thought. Good idea, bad idea, this is boring, why is there war? Its new, much more useful job is to be a gentle coach, just quietly saying, okay, we got distracted, no big deal. Let's just gently bring our attention back. And to make sure all of this actually sticks, the advice is to become a scientist of your own mind with something called the evening audit. It's just what it sounds like. Each night you reflect. How many times did I get hooked by anxiety or reaction today? And did I remember to use my tools when it really mattered? This isn't about beating yourself up. It's about collecting data to refine your practice. It's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy with a Vedantic spine. And that brings us to our final section, questioning the questioner. And this is where we get to the most profound paradigm shift in this entire approach. The entire game changes when you change the fundamental question you're asking. See, the old default question always points outward. Why is the world so unjust? Why are people like this? The seeker's question, the powerful question, points inward. Why does my mind lose its peace in 5 seconds flat? The first question is an endless rabbit hole. The second one, that's a doorway to real freedom.
And this leads to such a crucial point. How do you measure progress on this path? It's not about how cleverly you can debate politics or point out other people's flaws. No way. The real metrics are all internal. Do you feel just a little bit more calm after your practice? Are your reactions during the day a little bit softer? Is your evening reflection getting more honest? That is real progress.
And really, that's what it all comes down to. This is the ultimate commitment. It's about carving out a little bit of sacred time in your day where you consciously decide to stop renting your happiness, to stop acting like you're the auditor-in-chief of the entire universe, and to finally use that rare, powerful intellect for what it was truly made for, to discover the vast, peaceful, and totally owned territory that's waiting for you within.